the fuck are the Knicks doing, Howard? What are the front office doing? What's going on here?
Speaking of flailing. Oh, man.
Doesn't have to be this way.
Doesn't have to be. So wait a minute. We haven't done a show since the firing. Is that the case? Because we were off since Friday unexpectedly. Listen, I covered this on Zach's pod last week, so I don't want to repeat too much of it. But this is a really difficult one from my standpoint because I do think it's really startling and very indicative of where we are in the NBA that a coach can lead a team to back-to-back 50-win seasons for the first time in 25 years, go to the conference finals for the first time in 25 years, and then get fired. It is indicative. It is in the same vein as Taylor Jenkins being fired with a couple weeks to go with a playoff team, and Michael Malone. Stop it, Roger. Don't give me that look. I never defended it at the time. I just
no, fuck that. Yes, you did. Hey, Roger, you hear this bullshit? Do you hear this bullshit?
I just explained what I had heard as to why. I explained. I did not defend.
You definitely explained. I will say though, if I'm being honest, there was a time where I ranted, and you did play devil's advocate in the defense of it.
And not what the Raja devil's advocate.
What that means ultimately, I don't know, Howard, but that happened.
Is this not a podcast? Do we not play devil's advocate and debate things on a podcast?
It's levels to the devil's advocate.
That's all I'm saying.
It's levels to the devil's advocate.
I never said Taylor Jenkins should be fired.
Never.
I never said he should be. Nor did I ever say that Michael Malone should be fired. I said I can understand that this is the context under which they did it, and this is the rationale, and some of that rationale might have some validity to it. I get it, even if I don't think it's right. I didn't sign off any of those. Shut up.
That's fair.
It just felt like a little strong devil's advocate, not the Raja devil's advocate where he just says it for the sake of saying it, and I don't think he believes it. I felt like he believed some of it.
It was a defensive devil's advocate.
Yeah, it was a defensive devil's advocate.
Listen, to the point, but to the point, I thought we were talking about the Knicks. Thibs led the Knicks to back-to-back 50-win seasons, first time in 25 years. Thibs leads them to the conference finals, first time in 25 years. Thibs presided over their best 5-year span that they've had in forever. And much of what the Knicks are right now, respectable, competitive, not being pointed and laughed at. He should get credit for a lot of that, because for 20 years they were being pointed and laughed at.
Howard, you're in a bag right now. You're in a bag.
And so I think there's a lot of this that you look at and you think this is nuts, except in the context of today's NBA and the way coaches are fired, even the way GMs are fired, the way that teams act rashly, impulsively a lot. The Suns, 3 coaches in 3 years. Yeah, this is just the NBA. So like the Knicks are no better or worse than anybody else with regard to that. But the Thibs thing is a little bit complicated, guys. Like, I hate to say it, there are some valid criticisms of Thibs. I know we're not supposed to say that, but there are. The front office, at least some members of that front office, clearly had some of those same concerns. There are times when a coach runs his course with a team. Is that the case here? I don't know. I'm not in a position to say that for sure. We have seen plenty of instances where a coach was fired and the next coach got that team further, even to a finals or a championship. That happens sometimes. I don't know if that's going to be the case this time or not. I think the biggest issue here, just to spin it forward, is this. If you fire a coach like Tom Thibodeau, who's clearly very good at what he does and is one of the bigger reasons why they are where they are and have made all this progress. He's not the only one, right? Jalen Brunson deserves the top 3 lines on why the Knicks are now good and respectable and not being pointed and laughed at. Jalen Brunson deserves most of the credit. Front office, by the way, is the one who signed Jalen Brunson when nobody saw this version of Jalen Brunson coming. Thibs presides over his emergence, so that you could say maybe he gets credit for his breakout. But the front office went out and got the OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl Anthony Towns, and Josh Hart. I mean, like, they put together a really solid roster that enabled them to get here, and Thibs does what he does, and he got the most out of it. I don't think you should be fired for not making the finals. That's silly. I don't think that's probably the reason, but it's also hard to know because this front office never talks. We will never know what their rationale was, except for through sourcing and bland-ass press releases that don't tell us shit. So don't expect we're ever going to understand the real truth behind this, because those guys will not be accountable ever. They will not sit in front of a microphone ever. But you have to have somebody in mind, and they don't. Like if the guy they had in mind is Jason Kidd's under contract, and you don't even have a lot of like extra draft capital.
Also, that's not an inspiring thing to do, right? Like,
and he's not an upgrade. Whatever you think of Jason Kidd or Thibs, you can't tell me that Jason Kidd's a definitive upgrade over Thibs. He's just different. I don't know that there is an obvious answer there, but we're a week since the firing, and we still are no closer to knowing who they're going to get. So they didn't fire Thibs with a clear agenda in mind, or we know we have a better alternative in mind. It's just the open search, which fine. The next guy, who knows, might get them further, might be the guy who unlocks that offense a little bit more and makes it a little less Jalen Brunson centric. Like there are some valid criticisms on both sides of the ball here. And maybe the next coach addresses those and the Knicks front office will look like they made the smart move. As of right now, this just looks a little murky.
Raja, what does this do for the continuity of the Knicks?
You did that on purpose. Look, man, I mean, I have to admit that today's NBA player / locker room is way more accommodating of change on the fly than it was probably when I played. Like we didn't operate in that world as well as some of these players do today. A lot of that has to do with, just the way kids are raised and attention spans, quite frankly. You're only locked in for a certain amount of time anyway. So, having a new voice in there, so on and so forth. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that. So I don't ultimately know what it does to the Knicks. I would just say, as I said about some of the other firings, we can have criticism of Thibs and all of that. It speaks to something bigger to me. Like if there was like a fundamental disagreement after the season ended, whether that be with something Thibs was doing, whether that had to do with overall personnel, if it had to do with targets via free agency, it speaks to a disconnect between someone there. And the reason I say that is because if you're just gonna fire him because the move that's going to be made post Thibs that's going to get you to a point where everyone can look at the roadmap and say, yup, this is what we needed. This is definitively an upgrade. And that's one thing. But if you're just going to fire him and we're going to be sitting here a week later, like, well, what the fuck is the plan? Like, what are we doing? That doesn't, I mean, there seems to be something bigger going on there, right? Like that's not look, I don't run businesses, so far be it from me, but like that doesn't sound like it just was, hey man, we had some concerns with his rotations and dude said he practiced them really hard. Like what the fuck are we talking about? You know what I mean? We're talking about the New York Knicks. Dude, that's $1 billion. Like what are we, like, you just fire him and say, hey, we hope we can get Jason Kidd extracted from the Dallas situation.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, it speaks to something
and
like that we're not
and
being
we're still paying him
to.
$30 million. And we're still paying him $30 million.
I mean, they don't care about that. I mean, the one thing you could never criticize Dolan over, and there's plenty to criticize him for, but like he's always been willing to spend. So if he thinks it's the right move to fire the coach and pay him $30 million for just to sit at home, that doesn't affect the fans. It doesn't affect anybody else. Who cares about the money? I think it's more just the fact that this sequence of events doesn't inspire much confidence. It makes it look like they did not have a clear vision in mind when they made this move. And that's the problem. And it could all end up fine. Raja, the question I would have for you though is just this, like, we all watched what we watched this playoff run where it's like they stunned the crap out of the Celtics and it was incredible, maybe the biggest playoff series victory for the Knicks in, quarter century. There were times where it looked like the Pistons might actually knock them out the first round. They had some struggles there. They lost to the Pacers. When you watch them play, and if you're just thinking like, you know what, we get to start from scratch. We're going to have a new coach. What kind of coach do they need? And I don't mean just like personality, like, player friendly versus old school. But like, when you're watching them, are you thinking there are other things to unlock here and they need a coach who does X?
Well, it's a good question. Let me go back and say to any Knicks fans, and I've heard, there are reasons and that can all be true. Like, but I would say to you this, I've been sitting here telling you that from a roster perspective, the Knicks could have very easily after seeing Detroit against them, Cliff was closer to being right than I thought. Like I came on here and said that. They should not have beat the Boston Celtics. Yeah. They should not. Like, it's not like their roster was so strong and so talent laden that they underachieved. And so, when you ask me what someone could do that Thibs didn't do, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who, schematically and culturally was better defensively. Like that's what Thibs does. So it makes me go to the offensive side of the ball. And then, maybe we can live in a world where we have Brunson being Brunson with less overall usage rate, which would allow some of those other players to kind of spread their wings offensively and help in a way. But, then the argument is, well, is Brunson with a lesser usage rate? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. No, Howard, I don't know because it's like personnel is personnel.
Yeah. So
unless the coach is coming in with a personnel plan to go with his plan to implement on the court, like, I don't know.
I will say this, and one of the reasons I asked, some of the stuff I heard from people last week as I was like kind of poking around, and I talked to some coaches around the league, and I talked to some folks who had a little bit of insight into what the Knicks were thinking in terms of their concerns. There's definitely a strain of they could get more out of that offense, that Yep. Jalen Brunson has the ball in his hands way too long, way too deep in the shot clock. All the analytics show that like your efficiency goes way down the deeper into the shot clock that you shoot. And the Knicks, I think, were either if they weren't 30th, they were really close to the bottom in terms of like running the shot clock down to a whatever that is. Yeah. They were one of the most consistent shooting late in the shot clock, and that hurts your efficiency. They got Mikal Bridges, and we talked about this all through the season. Like, why don't they use Mikal Bridges a little bit more as a creator and a ball handler, secondary playmaker? Because he can do that. He did it in Phoenix. He was miscast as a primary playmaker in Brooklyn because they didn't have anything else. But the dude can do a lot more. And we saw that at times, especially when Brunson was out late in the season. They want to see more out of Cat as a fulcrum of the offense. And we've seen their ability to do that and his ability to do that. So I do think a different coach can open up different things with this offense. I've absolutely been, I believe that more having talked to some coaches around the league over the course of the last week. And some of them even said, one of them in particular said flat out, like, love Thibs, respect the hell out of what he's done in his career and with the Knicks specifically, but he's coaching like it's still the 90s. And I said, you mean on offense? He says both sides.
Well, I mean, that's fair. I'd have to really dig into their tape and be, in a way that I haven't to prepare for this pod to like really give you I'll trust to give you a real opinion on it. I'll trust the people that you spoke to. I certainly see that offensively, right? Like I mean, the interesting part about it is all those guys played together like at Villanova, right? And so you think getting them, but Jalen Brunson didn't play like that at Villanova all the time. Like he's morphed into this, like the more, the better of an NBA player he's turned into. Now, I did hear some things, and I don't know how true they are or not. These are just rumblings about like, dad on staff, having the ear of the coaches, having a little bit of input into how we play offensively. I don't know if any of that's true or not, but like certainly I think you could get that ball humming around the court, get more touches for other people, play a little quicker. It's not that Brunson could not do that. It's really not. Like he's an excellent player. He'll be able to play in any way. But is he the same value of player? And if he's not, do those other pieces take steps up in their value to offset what you're not getting from Brunson? That's the equation like that you have to figure out. So, I'll trust that. Defensively, I'd be interested to hear the logic behind that. Like it might just be, something that I'm not tapped into, and they're better, basketball minds than me. I'd like to see it. I'd like to understand that. I'd be interested in having that conversation with someone.